Okay, we're going to try it. The electricity's been on for about an hour, so I'm hoping it's going to stay on. So what we're looking at today, and this is a very short PowerPoint over what I discussed in class, so I hope I don't confuse you or myself anymore. Variable costing versus absorption costing, and we've been doing absorption costing. And what that is where we look at all the costs incurred that are related to that product, and we add it to each unit as it's being manufactured. And that includes fixed costs that we use. This sometimes gives a really very skewed way of looking at income, which we're going to see when we do the practice set. So let me explain a little bit about the difference between absorption costing and variable costing. With absorption costing, we're always gathering, it's like a big snowball. Wherever the cost is, we just keep rolling it up into the product. So, and that's, the absorption costing is the only reporting that is accepted by GAAP, and that's why we use it. It is misleading, though, when we start to do make managerial decisions about costing. So then they have kind of looked at it and said, well, let's try variable costing for our management decisions. And variable costing includes only charges or costs that change with the production level. So, you know how we have fixed costs that never change with the production level, such as rent? You're going to have rent no matter what, but I have to have rent so I can do the production, so I'm going to add so much per part for that rent. Well, with variable costing, we ignore that rent, and that goes into period costs. And what you come up with, and this is the entire argument or the entire discussion right here, and it says, why is income under absorption costing affected by the production level when that for variable costing is not? And the accountant explains that it lays in the fixed overhead. That's the difference between the two. So under the absorption costing, if there are excess units produced that aren't sold, the fixed overhead costs stay with those units that are in inventory and will be expensed when we sell the units as cost of goods sold. Whereas when you're using variable, we're only putting the variable costs, or the costs that change with the production, into the cost of the product. And then we look at that rent, and it's expensed out as a period cost. And as we go through these, you're going to see the slight difference. And it does make a difference in income, but in the end, when all of the inventory is at zero, there is no difference. It's just a timing issue. So this is kind of what it looks like. Here's with absorption costing. We take the direct materials, the direct labor, the variable overhead, and the fixed overhead, and that all becomes product cost. And we get a unit cost. With variable costing, we only take the direct materials, the direct labor, and the direct variable overhead for the product cost to come up with an individual cost. That fixed overhead becomes a period cost and is taken out of the income after we've found the contribution margin and after we've done a gross margin, so to speak. So what it looks like is this. Here's your direct is 4 per unit, and the labor is 8 per unit. The variable is 180,000, and the fixed cost is 600,000. So we have total overhead cost of $780,000, and we expect to produce 60,000 units. So what does this look like? So with absorption costing, okay, look at this. The variable overhead and the fixed overhead is included. And when you break this down, let's go down here. Here's your direct materials. There's no difference between the two methods here. Direct labor, there's no difference. The variable costing, okay, the variable cost here is $180,000 divided by 60, $3 a unit, no different. But when you get to the fixed, when we look at that $600,000, we break it down per unit for absorption. So we charge that fixed overhead $10 to each item made or unit made. In variable costing, we don't do that. So we have a difference in the cost of that product. So when I figure out cost of goods sold, this one is going to have a higher cost of goods sold, correct? Per piece. And this one's going to be lower. And then this cost is always taken out after the contribution margin is set up. And this is what it ends up at. Let's look at this. Here's a need to know. So we've got direct material cost at 6, labor cost at 14, variable overhead at 220,000. We're making 20 units, so that's $11 per unit. Fixed overhead is 680,000 divided by 20,000, so that's $34 units. And we expect to produce 20,000. So if I compute the total cost, product cost between the two, I'll end up with, for absorption, $65 a unit. And for the variable, I'm going to end up with $31 per unit. So this, okay, stores that fixed cost. If I don't sell everything, part of those fixed costs stay in the inventory, which makes a heck of a difference. So keep that in mind. Here's an analysis of it now. Okay, and so what we're going to look at is when you have produced 60,000 units and you sell 60,000 units and there's no ending inventory, there's really no difference between the two methods. It's when you end up having units left in the ending inventory that you'll find a difference, because the fixed costs that we assign per unit in under absorption cost stays with the product in ending inventory. When we use variable, it goes right to the bottom line. So let's kind of look at this. So here's our first one. So when we have units produced equal units sold, you're going to have differences in numbers, but you're not going to have a difference in net income. So this is the absorption, I believe. So we've got 60,000 at $40. The cost is $25 per unit. So we've got $2.4 million in sales and $1.5 million in cost of goods sold. Gives us a gross margin of $900,000. And then we take off the administrative, and that has that variable overhead in there. So the net income under absorption cost for this one is $580,000. Makes perfect sense, right? Now this is the same thing under variable. Sales is 2.4. We're going to take the variable cost right here. Let's move that. That's in the way right now. I'll bring it down in a minute. We will have variable cost of 60,000 at $15 is 900,000. We have variable selling and administratives at 60,000 times 2, which is 120. So now I have $1,020,000 in cost for that product, and I have a contribution margin of $1.38 million. Now, you'll notice on this we charge $25, right? And there's no $600,000 taken out beyond that with here. That $600,000 is right up there. It's right in your cost of goods sold. If I come down here, I'm only using $15 as the cost. I'm in a variable now. But here I'm taking out that entire $600,000 in fixed expenses. So we end up with the same income, $60,000 for $60,000. So it's just a matter of this one, which is absorption, has the $600,000 built into the cost of goods sold. This one has the $600,000 taken out after the contribution margin. So it's not wrapped into the units. So kind of wrap around that. And our net income's the same. It's just a matter of where the expense comes out. So if we go to here, and we'll look at this again, this is units produced equal units sold. This is the absorption. You come down with 1.5 total cost, but we come down here, I've only got $900,000 in total costs. The other $600,000 comes out of period cost here. And this works perfectly fine as long as the units we produce equal the units we sold. So there's no difference in it. But what happens when it exceeds? So let's go down, and now they're saying, well, we made $60,000, but we only sold $40,000. This is our sales, our gross sales. We had $40,000 times 25. We're in absorption now. So I have $1 million in cost of goods sold. I have a margin of $600,000. Here are my administrative expenses. I have a net income of $320. That's using the absorption cost. Now, here's where you're going to have a difference. Under the variable cost, let's move that puppy. Move it up here. You've got the same amount of sales, but then your costs change because now I'm looking at $40,000 at $15, and that's $600,000. I'm looking at those variables that I had from selling and administrative. They've moved up, and that's $80,000. So now I've got a contribution margin of $920,000. Now, instead of having that $600,000 up here, fixed overhead, we've brought it down here, and we're going to take it right off the bottom line right now. There's our $600,000 in fixed, and here's our $200,000 in administrative expenses. So now I have a net income of $120,000. Same, okay, same company. This is their income statement. This is what's going to show for their for their financial statement. You're going to show a net income of $320. But when you come to make managerial decisions, that income statement is going to look different. It's going to only have $120,000 worth of net income. Now, obviously, managers like this one much better than they like this one, simply because a lot of times you have commissions that run off of this, or incentives, or bonuses. This is a lower income, but it also shows you the true expenses that are wrapped up in each unit, so you can make decisions about this without having to. Now, what happened? Okay, why is that? Is this a trick or what? Where is that $200,000? There's $200,000 difference here. Where did it go? Well, there are 20,000 units here that we made, right? And we haven't, there's 20,000 units here that we made that are still sitting in inventory. Of that 20,000 units, $10 is fixed. So if I take 10 times that 200,000, guess where that $200,000 is sitting? It's sitting in inventory and hasn't been expensed out yet. It will be next month when you sell them, but for now, it's wrapped up as an asset. Here, right here, we expense that whole amount out. So that's already been deducted. So when we sell these units next month for $15, those 20,000 units for $15, our expense will be less. and we'll catch up with that. So as you look at it now, okay, here it is again, and that entire 600,000 was expensed here. It was not expensed up here on this one. Only 280,000 was expensed. The rest, some of it came through with the cost of goods sold. So let's look at this now. Now here's your difference. As you're going back and forth, you're seeing, look at the ending inventory. This variable ending inventory is 300,000. This ending inventory for absorption is 500,000. Difference 200,000, right? And that's the difference between our expenses. So as you go down, now we're going to look at what happens when you sell less than when you produce less than what is sold. And that's just going to be a reverse, right? So if we look at this, we sold 80,000 and we only had evidently, gosh, it doesn't tell us, units produced were 60,000 and we sold 80,000, which means we pulled that other 20,000 out of inventory. So this is absorption, and you end up with a net income of 840,000 because this right here has the $200,000 in it of fixed costs. So if we come down and look at it under variable, we get an entirely different look. Now I'm showing a net income of $1,040,000, and that's simply because I pulled 200,000 out using the absorption, and here that amount was already removed. So those 20,000 extra are being costed at $15 instead of at $25. The $10 difference is the $200,000 difference in the net incomes. So it catches up. It's just you have to learn to wrap around what they're saying. So, and that's kind of a comparison. Now, if you look down at this, look at this. We have 60,000 produced, okay? 580 were perfect. There's no difference. Here we produced 60,000. We only sold 40. So I had income of 320 and 120 here. There was a $200,000 positive difference. In 2015, we turned it all around again, and we produced 60,000 units, but we sold 80,000 units. Again, you've got this $200,000 difference, but it's on the negative side now, so we've pulled it from inventory. But look, if you go across and add this... How about that? The dogs heard something fall on the roof. So if you take this whole series and compare, typically they have made 60,000, 60,000, and 60,000. They made 180,000 units, and they sold 180,000 units. Your incomes are identical after 3 years. But the difference just shows up in between each year because of the way you're pulling it out of inventory. So now we're going to go do some of these so that they make more sense. You've kind of gotten a feel for it. So let's get this one up, and then we'll go to the other. Thank you.